In the last video, we learned about for loops, which were a way to repeat a piece of Python code a certain fixed number of times. But if you remember our original motivation for introducing loops, it was for a guessing game in which we wanted to repeat a piece of code until a condition was met. We didn't know in advance how many times we'd have to repeat it. In order to do something like that in Python, what you need is called a while loop, which is the subject of this video. So here's how a while loop works in Python. You begin with the word while, and then a condition which should have a Boolean value, true or false, and then a colon. After that, you put some indented code, and the indented code will be run over and over again until the condition becomes true. So let's see an example of this, and I'll talk you through what's going to happen. In our first code cell here, we begin on line 1 by defining a variable whose name is I and whose value is 0. Then on line 2, we enter a while loop. So we have the word while and then a Boolean condition. So I is less than 4. That's true or false. It's a Boolean condition. Then, as usual, we end with a colon. Following that, we have some indented code, lines 3 and 4 in this case. And what happens on those indented lines are that we print out the value of I and then increase the value of I by 1. So what will happen is that Python will enter that while loop, check whether the initial value of I is less than 4. So 0 is less than 4, that's true, so it will execute lines 3 and 4. And then it will go back to line 2 and check whether the condition is true. Okay, 1 is less than 4, so it will then execute lines 3 and 4 again. And it will keep doing this over and over again until the condition becomes false. Once the condition is false, Python will just continue with whatever comes after the while loop, which in our case is line 5 here, that just prints out the word done. So when we run this, initially I will be 0. So the lines 3 and 4 will be executed with I equals 0. So we'll print out 0. Then I becomes 1. We'll check the condition again. 1 is less than 4. So we'll print out the number 1 and increase I again. And we'll keep doing that until the condition becomes false. The first time that's going to happen is when I is equal to 4. So we'll print out 0, 1, 2, 3, and then because I equals 4, we won't execute the while loop anymore, and instead we'll go to line 5 and print out the word done. So that's what happens here. We get 0, 1, 2, 3 when I is 0, I is 1, I is 2, I is 3. After that, I becomes 4, so the condition is false, and Python ignores the rest of the while loop and continues with whatever comes after, which in this case causes it to print the word done. Okay, let's look at another reason, so another situation in which we might want to use a while loop. And that's for this iterative sequence, which I'm going to define now. So we define a sequence of real numbers by making the first term x1 equal to 1, and then defining xn plus 1 to be xn plus 2 divided by xn all over 2. It happens that this sequence converges to root 2, so you'll perhaps learn about that in analysis in the future, but for now just take it for granted that this sequence converges to the square root of 2. So perhaps we want to keep computing terms of this sequence until we first find a term whose square is within 0.00001 of 2, for example. So how can we do that? Well, first of all, we need to know about how to do absolute values, because if we want to check whether the distance between xi squared and 2 is less than some particular value, we need to look at the absolute value of the difference. In Python, you can do absolute values using the command abs. So abs works out the absolute value of its input. So for example, abs of minus 2 would be 2, and abs of, say, 1.5 or any positive number would just be the same positive number again. Okay, so let's write this while loop, which is going to compute terms of this sequence and just stop when it finds the first term whose square is within a particular distance from 2. So I should begin by making a variable which is going to hold the terms of my sequence. I'll call it x, and initially it should be 1 because that's the first term in the sequence. Then we need to repeat this over and over again until a particular condition is true. So we have to use a while loop. We'll have while, and then we need to think what the condition is going to be. So we want to keep going while the distance between the square of our sequence term and 2 is greater than or equal to 0.000001. Let's do this, for example. Then we have to have a colon, and then we need a body for the while loop, which is the code which is going to be executed over and over again. So all we want to do here is just replace x with the next term in the sequence. So let's let x be equal to x plus 2 divided by x, all divided by 2. Okay, so that's going to do it. So let's actually print out x at the end here. Or in fact, let's print out at the end the absolute value of x squared minus 2. So we can see how close it was to, in its square, to 2. So when I run this, you can see I get actually a very small number. In fact, here's something that's not come up yet. This notation I think we have not seen yet. So we have here e to the minus 12. E minus 12. What does that mean? So let's just add a comment. Well, e minus 12 means times 10 to the power minus 12. So this is an extremely small number. 4.5 times 10 to the minus 12 is very, very small. Okay, let's also print out x. So instead of that, let's actually print out just the value of x we get at the end, so we can see that it's close to the square root of 2. And yeah, there, that first thing that got printed out, 1.414, that's pretty close to the square root of 2. So it seems like this is working. Okay, so our final thing to say about while loops is that you can easily cause yourself a big problem with a while loop, because a while loop repeats over and over until a particular condition becomes true. But what if that condition never becomes true? Well, in that case, the while loop is going to go over and over, it's going to repeat over and over and over again and never stop. So your computer will just get stuck trying to compute the same thing, or try executing the same code over and over again and never stopping. So you need to see this in action, and you also need to know how to stop your while loop if you accidentally get into this situation. So let's look at an example where that might happen. Here is the first while loop that we met, which began with a variable whose name was I and whose value was 0, then entered a while loop where the condition was that I was less than 4, and it printed out I and then increased I by 1. So if I forgot the line which was supposed to increase I by 1, then all that would happen is I would be 0, and then we would check the condition, is it less than 4? Yes, it is. So we execute the body and print out 0, and then we go back and check the condition again. Well, I is still 0, so the condition is true, and we print it out again, and so on. So what this is going to do is just going to print out zeros forever. It's going to keep infinitely printing out zeros over and over and over again. So let's run this to see what happens. You can see I get 0, 0, 0, 0, zeros, and you can see a little star there to tell me that this cell is still running, and in fact it's never going to stop. So if you want to stop it, you need to click on the black square at the top there. Okay, that's what you should do then if you accidentally write a while loop which never stops. You need this black square at the top.